Hi, my name is Bill Brayton, and in this edition of Virtual Training Solutions powered by ATRA, we are going to be covering the front pump / front support for the 845RE. So let's get right to it. We have it here on our bench. We can see we have an A clutch. We've got a clutch hub here, back around the front. This is the aluminum cover for the assembly. Typical, got an O-ring to it. So let's start by taking that O-ring off. We'll just set all of our parts aside here. And to split these halves, we're going to have to take apart, disassemble the A clutch. So let's do that. Let's do that now. Pretty straightforward. Snap ring comes out. All we need to do is grab the hub and lift the A clutches right up and out of there. The bottom plate may stick down into it, may stick down into the drum because just the clutches are captured. And this bearing, we'll drop that out of there. This bearing right here stays attached to the hub. It's snapped on there pretty good. We're not gonna mess with that right now. There's also a race down in here for the bearing that goes in between the support. That rides on this bearing right here. That will typically stay with the hub. And the bearing and race are all attached together. So we'll just take that and set that aside with the rest of our parts here. So now we have the A clutch return spring and retainer and the piston that we have to take out. But before we're going to do that, we're going to take the B clutch piston, which is this piston right here, and this housing off. And it's important to notice the little tab right here. That's an alignment tab. So we can start with our pocket screwdriver to get in here and pry this off, or can we? Let's see if we get in here. Okay, so anywhere you can get the screwdriver in, we're just going to give it a little twist to lift it up. And then we're gonna get in here with our bigger screwdriver. There we go. Now it all comes, the piston and the housing come up as an assembly. I always want to remember that this alignment tab fits down into this slot. So it's pretty straightforward. The piston comes out of the housing like so. The outer seal here is molded into the housing itself. And then we've got an O-ring on the outside. It's actually a D-ring that we can set aside. And the inside is a lip seal. So those come out, and now we'll just go ahead and set that assembly aside. Now we're all good to take this over to a suitable press and compress the return spring and remove these retainers, which we'll do right now. Okay, now we've got this set up in our foot press here. Everybody should have one of these in their shop. There we go. There's one. And we'll just rotate that other one around. Can you get that okay? All right. There's the other retainer. And then back out of the foot press we go. Back over to the bench. Always good to have a hole in the bench so you can work on this sitting flat. Now, up comes the Belleville spring. So just to look down into the pump, that's where that sits, right evenly on the A-clutch piston. And then we want to remove the A-clutch piston. A long pair of needle nose works okay. Short pair, I'm sure, would work okay too. And there we have the A-clutch piston. Now this inner and outer seal, lip seals, we were going to remove and discard those. If I could get my hands on it, there we go. And the outer seal. And we're going to set that over there with the rest of our O-rings. Those are all going to be renewed when we get back and rebuild with the rebuild kit. Of course, all those rubber seals are going to be changed. And so now we've got a number 40 Torx bit. We've got 2, 4, 5 on the inside here. We've got 5 number 40 Torx bits and 1 out over here to replace those. Now, while we're at it, before we go any further, let's get rid of this. This is the inner seal for the molded housing for the B-clutch piston. Okay, and as you can see, this thing is still pretty oily, so we're going to have to do some serious cleanup here. But for right now, let's get these bolts out of here. Now, there's one special thing about these bolts that we're taking out here right now. These are magnesium bolts. They're magnesium bolts, and they're also torque to yield bolts. So once we take these apart, we basically want to throw them away because they're not usable anymore. They've already had their stretch pulled out of them. And if you reuse these bolts, there's an extremely high chance that they could snap and break because they've lost their tensile strength when they've been torqued to yield. So those should be replaced when we go back together with it. So now we can lift the pump body, this actually clutch housing slash pump housing off. Oh, look at there. Here we can see the heart, this chain driven pump. It's a offset chain driven pump. This part here splines to the inside of the torque converter so that the pump is turning anytime the engine's running. And here, of course, is the stator support. So this is an offset chain driven pump, and we'll get to that here in just a second. So we'll move our cover aside, and now you can truly see that this is just a cover. It really, the only thing it has in it is the front seal, and there's a bearing inside of there. So that's really all there is to it. When we go back together, we clean this thing up, we'll remove this front seal, clean up the housing, closely inspect this, this bearing for any pitting or wear, and replace it as needed. But so far this part looks pretty doggone good, and so we'll just set that aside until it's time to clean up. Now we'll get to the business end of the pump here, which is this whole section right here. So to get this off, to get this out of here, we are simply going to pry up on the tabs. Whoop, there it goes. And we're going to lift this up and out as one piece. Now we can take the chain off and the gear and our drive gear off, and we can set both of those aside for cleaning. Kind of hard to believe, really, when you think about it, that this is the pump for this unit, and it's just that small. All right, so we're going to give me a minute, and we're going to set some stuff aside here and clean our bench off. We're going to take this little gem apart. Okay, so we've got our work area cleaned off here a little bit, and we've got this little tiny little pump here, we can go ahead and get rid of the O-rings here. Just set those aside. No worries. Now, I don't know if you can, it's pretty tough to see, but the next thing we're going to be taking apart, there's a very tiny little wire clip in here that is basically holding this whole assembly together. So we're going to take that little circlip wire snap ring off of here. Now it's going to get distorted, and I am 90% sure that a new one comes in the kit. Okay, now we've got our little tiny circlip off here. Let's see if I can put it on a little lighter platform. You see that that's just the size of that little wire ring, and like I said, I'm 95% sure that that a new clip comes into the kit. So we're going to set that aside. You don't want to fuss with it too much. So next, off comes the top of the pump. Now, look closely here. You can see there's a snap ring in here, and this is actually called a baffle. And that's loose in there, and that's completely normal. Okay, so you want to just leave that in here. Now we've got the upper end of the pump, or actually it could be called the lower end because it's down inside the housing, but okay. So, and you want to be sure that that's free of wear. It's not got grooves in it, because this is where the rotor rides off of, okay? And you know, you can see based on the palm of my hand how small this rotor is right here. I'd say it's even smaller than the size of a silver dollar. So it's a pretty small piece of equipment here. So what we can do next is take the housing, the pump housing itself, and pry it up and off of the pump. And it doesn't really matter. We can hold these vanes down in here, and then off it comes, off the housing comes. And it has a top and a bottom, so it'll only go on one way. So don't worry about that. And now we're going to pull off the individual vanes. Super critical right here. Don't lose these. Do not lose these. These are very small, very individual pieces. If you lose one of these during the process, you'll have to buy a complete new pump for that. It's very critical to set these aside, set them on a magnet, set them on a place you won't have to worry about them. Okay, now we've got that out. We can pull our pins, our guide pins out. There's one. There's the other. That holds it all, holds all these in line. Now we can mess with the other little ring that's holding the rotor on. See, this has got another ring down in here that we're going to get in there, and so we can remove the rotor. And there's a reason why we're going to do this, and we're going to get to that in just a second. But first I'm going to attack this little snap ring, and I'll be right back. Okay, we're back, and we've got our little circlip, our metal snap ring off. Now we can pull that rotor off. And on this particular rotor, it has an ID groove right here that is facing away from the front housing or the top housing. So we want to note that for when we go back together, the little ID groove goes towards the bottom plate. So we're going to set that aside and we're going to push that shaft out of the housing. And we have a lip seal right here. You'll notice that it is with the garter spring facing out. So when we go back together again, we want to make sure that we put it back together again that way. So that's the disassembly of the front pump and the support A clutch housing. So we're going to go clean everything up and get some new seals on these pistons and the housings. And we'll be right back to put it all back together again.